What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I have a graphic novel that I want to talk to you about. Fantastic Four, the John Byrne Visionaries, Volume 8. This is the final volume of John Byrne's run on the Fantastic Four. I've been reviewing it on and off for quite a while now, and I thought this volume was okay. It doesn't end on a big, huge, whiz-bang ending. It actually kind of abruptly ends. This reminds me of John Byrne's West Coast Avengers run, where he was doing some big story, and then just right smack dab in the middle of the story, John Byrne leaves. He's no longer writing or drawing, and Roy Thomas, he took over West Coast Avengers. Well, here, you've got John Byrne is writing and drawing, and then in one issue, he's only writing, and Jerry Ordway is drawing, and then in the next issue, Roger Stern is writing and Jerry Ordway is drawing. But they collect that issue even though John Byrne was not involved at all because it's concluding the story that John Byrne began. And you've got basically three separate stories in this book. The first story is kind of the worst one in my opinion. It's basically there to explain why Doctor Doom was in the original Secret Wars miniseries, which I have read, but when I'm reading the Secret Wars, I don't really think about how it fits in with the rest of the Marvel Universe, if that makes any sense. I like reading Secret Wars, the original one, on its own and just viewing it as its own separate story. But apparently, when Secret Wars happened, Doctor Doom in the Fantastic Four comics was presumed dead. And then he was in Secret Wars. He actually had a very huge part in that story. And so I guess John Byrne realized that that was a continuity mistake, and so he spent a couple of issues trying to explain how Doctor Doom was in the Secret Wars story. And it's not really a very good issue. It's mostly just an explanation for why that mistake isn't really a mistake. I didn't really need that explanation, mostly because at the beginning of John Byrne's run on the Fantastic Four at one point, we ended an issue with Doctor Doom shrunk down. He was in this little miniature world that he had created to imprison the Fantastic Four, and he is stuck inside this little, or his mind is stuck inside this little robot avatar where all of these people who are also in this world are chasing him for all eternity. That was in one of the earlier volumes, I think like volume 2 of the Visionaries, and it's never explained how he escaped from that. Out of nowhere, Doctor Doom is back and he's in his normal, non-microscopic body. John Byrne never bothered explaining how he got out of that scenario, so I don't know why they thought that they had to explain how Doctor Doom was able to participate in the Secret Wars story. But they did, and this is another tie-in with Secret Wars 2, where the Beyonder is just kind of going around and visiting all these heroes all across the Marvel Universe, and once again, I will never recommend anyone read Secret Wars 2. It seems like that thing was going on forever, because I remember near the very end of Volume 6, we had some tie-ins with Secret Wars 2, and then we had some more tie-in in Volume 7 with the issue where the kid sets himself on fire, and then we've once again got some tie-ins in this volume. So anyway, finally, the tie-ins with Secret Wars 2 are over, and then we get a story where the Fantastic Four, they go into outer space, and they kind of have a little altercation with Annihilus and Blaster. Annihilus, I think, is a pretty cool Fantastic Four villain. Blaster, I could care less about. He was in a really awful X-Men issue back in the late 60s. I don't care about Blaster. I don't know if he's that big of a Fantastic Four villain. This is the first time I've seen him in the Fantastic Four, but he's here. He's boring. I don't care about him. I like Annihilus. He doesn't do a whole lot, but he's kind of cool. But then, seemingly, Reed Richards dies. And this would be cool if, A, they actually tried to kill off Reed Richards for a little while. Now, obviously, they're not going to keep him dead, but you know how a few years ago, the Human Torch died, and then a year later they brought him back. If they had done something like that, where they tried to make us think that Reed Richards was actually dead, that would have been cool, but it only lasted a couple of issues, where the Fantastic Four, they come back down to Earth along with Nick Fury, Reed Richards is seemingly dead, and the Fantastic Four have arrived on Earth, but it's 1936. And then Nick Fury, he's like, well, okay, if we're in the 30s, I'm going to go and kill Adolf Hitler before all these people die in World War II. And then we find out that it's actually all just a telepathic simulation, and Reed Richards survived, and that's a pretty okay story. It kind of abruptly ended. That's not where John Byrne's run ends, but that story kind of just abruptly, oh, hey, you know how you thought you were in the 30s? You really weren't. It's weird how they jump from you're in the past to no, not really, you weren't in the past. And then we get this story where Reed Richards is trying to contact his original hometown of Central City, not to be confused with the hometown of Barry Allen, the Flash. He's trying to contact Central City, which is where he lived before he became Mr. Fantastic and everyone else became the Fantastic Four. He's trying to find the Thing, who I guess has disappeared in his own solo title, and in order to do that, he's trying to contact his old hometown, and his hometown is enveloped by this giant black energy dome. And then we find out that time has actually moved much, much faster inside this dome than it has outside of the dome. And then we find out what was going on inside the dome, why there's a dome. We find out all of that. The Fantastic Four, they go inside because She-Hulk accidentally gets sucked in because the dome is expanding. And that's a pretty okay story. I liked it all right, but then John Byrne leaves right in the middle of it, and that makes me think that John Byrne didn't leave amicably, that he kind of had some issues probably with Jim Shooter. He has talked before about how he really butted heads with Jim Shooter, especially in that issue where the kid sets himself on fire. John Byrne really did not want that to be a tie-in with Secret Wars 2, and Jim Shooter forced him to make it a tie-in to Secret Wars 2. So I have a feeling that John Byrne was just getting more and more upset with Shooter, and John Byrne is the kind of guy who is not very relaxed or easygoing. He has a lot of arguments and anger issues with a lot of people in the comic book industry. He left X-Men before he worked on Fantastic Four. He wasn't really in a good place with Chris Claremont when he left X-Men, and I've already talked about in one of my other Fantastic Four reviews how he and Claremont were kind of trying to one-up each other with these sort of non-official crossovers with their own books. So John Byrne left this book just kind of abruptly, and then Roger Stern and Jerry Ordway took over. In my opinion, John Byrne's art is superior to Ordway's. I don't hate Ordway's art. I think he's a very good artist, but I don't think he's as good as John Byrne. And then Roger Stern, I think he does a really good job finishing off this run. I don't know if Stern continued on this book after what we have here, because I don't believe that there's any Roger Stern Fantastic Four collected that I know of. Maybe there is, and I'm just unaware of it. But I thought that Stern did a pretty good job, and maybe that's because Stern and Byrne have worked together before. They collaborated on Captain America. I'm not sure if that was before or after this, but they are collaborators. At least they have been in the past. So I feel like Stern is maybe on the same wavelength as Byrne, so maybe that's why I was okay with him finishing off John Byrne's story. But like I said, this doesn't really end in like okay, it's the finale to the epic, incredible, grand run of Fantastic Four that John Byrne did. A lot of people talk about John Byrne's run like it's the best thing ever, and I think after reading all of it, I'm going to have to say it's okay. There's some parts that are really, really good, and there's some parts that are really awful. For example, this story that tries to explain why Dr. Doom was part of Secret Wars, you didn't need that. Dr. Doom, he survives. Anytime he dies, just assume that he's not dead. We don't need 2 issues explaining why he is still alive, or why he was part of Secret Wars. We don't need anything like that. And I've said before that I really did not like the first volume of the John Byrne Visionaries. I didn't like a lot of what was in that volume. So anyway, I think that overall John Byrne's run is alright. It's not the best Fantastic Four stuff that I've ever read. I want to say I think the Mark Waid stuff is better than this. In fact, I'm definitely going to say the Mark Waid run from the early 2000s is superior to this run. But it is alright if you're looking for some pretty good Fantastic Four stuff. I would say just go ahead and get the Visionary stuff. I wouldn't say get the Omnibus because I think that that's been recolored, and I don't like it when collections come out and they recolor the comics that they're collecting, and also that Omnibus is going to be like, that thick. It's going to be huge, and that thing would be very unwieldy to try and hold it and read the comics inside. So I would say just go ahead and buy the Visionary volumes. For all I know, Marvel might be about to recollect those. It seems like every time I read a graphic novel, I turn around and then Marvel has recollected it, or DC has recollected it, and then I have the older printing. But anyway, if you're interested, go read the Visionaries. Start with Volume 1. If you don't like it, I would say read the first 2 volumes. And if you don't like that, you might not like this run. Volume 2 is superior to Volume 1, so don't judge this whole run on Volume 1. But those are overall my thoughts on the entire John Byrne Fantastic Four run. I hope that you guys liked me talking about his run, and that's about all I have to say about this volume. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back in the future with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.